Welcome to Storytime with Miss Jane. We have 3 new books to read today. The first one is called Miss Tizzy by Libba Moore Gray, illustrated by Jada Rowland. There it is. Miss Tizzy. Miss Tizzy always wore a purple hat with a white flower in it and high-top green tennis shoes. The neighbors thought her peculiar, but the children loved her. Miss Tizzy's house was pink and sat like a fat blossom in the middle of a street with white houses, white fences, and very neat flower gardens. Miss Tizzy had no fence at all, but she had flowers that grew everywhere and spilled over onto the sidewalk. Miss Tizzy let the children pick the flowers. Then she gave them clean glass jelly jars to put them in, and the children loved it. Miss Tizzy's big yellow cat, Hiram, slept in a window box in the middle of some red geraniums. Sometimes he climbed on her shoulders and hung there like a tired old fur piece. On Mondays, Miss Tizzy baked cookies. She let the neighborhood children put in the raisins and then lick the bowl while the cookies were baking. The children loved it. On Tuesdays, Miss Tizzy made puppets out of old socks. She made a puppet for each boy and girl. They made up their own stories and put on shows for Miss Tizzy. She laughed and clapped every time, and the children loved it. On Wednesdays, Miss Tizzy played her bagpipes. She gave the children spoons and pans and let them pretend they were playing real drums. Each Wednesday, one child got to be special and play a silver penny whistle. Every child got a turn. They marched up and down the street with Miss Tizzy and her bagpipes leading the parade. Hiram sometimes marched along, and the children loved it. On Thursdays, Miss Tizzy gave the children clean white paper and crayons. They drew pictures of sunshine and butterflies. They put them in Miss Tizzy's red wagon and delivered them all over town to people who'd stopped smiling and had grown too tired to come out of their houses anymore. Hiram rode in the front of the wagon with a red ribbon around his neck, and the children loved it. On Fridays, Miss Tizzy opened her trunk and they all played dress up. There were hats with feathers and hats with bows. There were baseball caps and straw hats with bright red bands. Everyone wore a hat. Miss Tizzy put on a lace shawl and served pink lemonade in her best china cups, and the children loved it. On Saturdays, Miss Tizzy put roller skates on her green tennis shoes and went up and down the sidewalks. The children came out of the white houses and joined her. They made a roller skate train holding on to Miss Tizzy's long skirt. Hiram was usually the caboose. The children made train sounds and Miss Tizzy was the engineer. She never scolded the children for being too loud, and the children loved it. On Sundays, when the day was over, the children stretched out on bright quilts in Miss Tizzy's backyard and looked up at the stars. The tree frogs croaked their summer sounds as Miss Tizzy sang songs about the moon, slightly off key. The children didn't care. They loved it. One day, Miss Tizzy took off her purple hat with the white flower and laid it on the window seat. Then she took off her high-top green tennis shoes and placed them under her high white bed. Miss Tizzy lay down on her feather mattress. She was very sick. Hiram left his window box and curled up at her feet. He did not purr any more. The doctor came and went. He shook his head and looked very serious. The children were sad. They didn't know what to do. They missed their grown-up friend. Finally, they had an idea. On Monday, they baked cookies with raisins and brought them to the pink house. On Tuesday, they stood in the yard and held up puppets to the window. They put on a puppet show just for Miss Tizzy. On Wednesday, they brought pans and spoons and played a soft little drumming sound just outside the door. On Thursday, they drew pictures with orange and red crayons and put them in Miss Tizzy's mailbox. On Friday, they put on funny hats and left a tea tray at the front door. They left Hiram a bowl of cool milk. On Saturday, they put a brand new pair of skates in a big box with a purple ribbon on top and took them to Miss Tizzy. On Sunday, when the sun went away, the children stood underneath Miss Tizzy's window. They sang all the moon songs she had taught them. Miss Tizzy's hat glowed in the moonlight. She was having a peaceful dream. She heard the children singing, and she loved it. The end. What a nice book that was. The next book we're going to read is called Ibis, and it is called A True Whale Story. That's kind of funny, huh? A true whale story. Deep in a bay, off the coast of an old fishing village, lived a pod of humpback whales. One of the whales was a little cat called Ibis. Ibis was curious about everything in the ocean. One day, she and her friend Blizzard went out swimming. They saw many kinds of fish. The most interesting were the starfish. Ibis liked to look at them. There was something about their shape that made her feel good. As Ibis and Blizzard were drifting over a reef, they heard a strange humming noise. The two calves looked up to see something large and dark pass overhead. It was big as a whale, but it wasn't a whale. The calves were frightened. They had never seen a boat before. They swam back to their mothers. The next day, Ibis went back to the reef. It wasn't long before another boat came along. Again, Ibis was scared, but she was curious too. She forced herself to swim to the surface. In the cool, hazy air, she saw several faces watching her. They didn't look scary. In fact, they looked very friendly. Ibis liked them. In the months that followed, Ibis and her friends lost their fear of boats. Boats came in many sizes and shapes, and the people in them always seemed to enjoy seeing the little whales. As Ibis grew up, she learned more about the sea. She knew what kinds of sharks to avoid, what food was the tastiest, and best of all, where to find the most dazzling starfish. Ibis never got tired of looking at the starfish. People in their boats became a part of her life. Whenever a boat passed overhead, she swam to the top to say hello. One evening, Ibis and Blizzard saw a school of fish swimming around the bottom of a ship. Maybe there was something good up there to eat. They went to find out. Suddenly, Ibis was caught in a fishing net. She fought to get free, but the more she struggled, the more tangled up she became. Finally, she broke loose, but part of the net was caught in her mouth and wrapped around her tail. Oh no. Blizzard swam off to find help. Ibis was confused and hurt. She wanted to get away, far from people and their boats and nets. Slowly and painfully, she made her way toward the deep ocean. Many weeks passed, and Ibis grew very ill. The net in her mouth made it hard for her to eat, and every time she went to the surface for air, the net cut into her tail. But if she didn't get air every half hour, she would die. Winter was coming, and it was time for the whales to move to warmer waters. But Ibis felt too weak to make the long journey. Instead, she turned back toward the coast. It was so hard for her to swim, she could barely keep moving. Ibis was about to give up when she saw a familiar shape. It was Blizzard. Blizzard saw that Ibis needed help. Gently, Blizzard pushed her to the surface so she could breathe. Suddenly, the water was filled with the sounds of boat engines. The whales saw two small rafts and a boat circling them. Blizzard and Ibis tried to get away fast, but Ibis wasn't quick enough. The boats rushed toward her before she could dive. The people in the boats began to attach large floats to the pieces of net that were hurting Ibis. Blizzard stayed nearby, circling the boats nervously. Because of the floats, Ibis could not dive. She began to panic, but she did not have the strength to fight. When the boats came in closer, a person reached into the water. Ibis stared at the person's hand. The hand reminded her of something she loved very much. She began to feel better. Soon many hands dipped into the water. Ibis felt them tugging at the lines of the net. Moments later, the lines fell away and she was free. Ibis blew a big spout from her blowhole, as if to say, "Thank you, thank you." Then she dived deep into the water. For the first time in many weeks, she felt no pain. She felt wonderful. Blizzard joined her. Then the two whales popped back to the surface for one more look. The people were waving their starfish-shaped hands. Ibis knew the hands had helped her, and that the people were still her friends. Soon, Blizzard and Ibis were leaping and diving with the other whales, far away in the warm waters where they would spend the winters together. Look at that. And here it says an afterword. Ibis is a real humpback whale. I first saw her one October morning in 1985 when my family and I were aboard a whale watching ship off the coast of Provincetown, Massachusetts. The whales swam right up to the boat, as if to welcome us to her part of the world. And we soon learned her story from a marine scientist on board. He told us that only 1 year before, Ibis had been caught in the strands of a fisherman's net. The scientists who studied the whales in the area found her fighting to surface for air. Several hours later, when she didn't come up, she was believed to have drowned. But shortly afterward, a research boat from the Provincetown Center set out to record whale songs. A member of the crew spotted two whales swimming together. One of the whales was trapped in a net. It was Ibis. The crew rescued her by attaching floats to her net. In this way, they could keep her at the surface so they could reach into the water to free her. She was the first whale ever saved from entanglement. Most are not so lucky. As I watched Ibis playing in the water around us, I could understand why those who knew her had fought so hard to save her, and I got the idea to write and illustrate my own version of her story for this book. Because of the successful rescue of Ibis, the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies has added an entanglement fund to their program. A portion of my profits from this book will go to that fund. Thank you, Ibis, for bringing me a little closer to your world. By John Himmelman. Okay, that's the end of our reading today. I will see you soon. Bye.